All right, well, good morning. Thank you for joining. My name is Andy White with Upg Technologies, and I will have everybody muted for the duration of the call. It is going to be, we'll take a look at this. The introduction this morning is for the QX general configuration, introduction into the QX and basic configuration and setup of the system. It's the first part of the Upg 2020 Summer Tech Series. We've got a couple other uh, webinars coming up. The 29th, we'll be covering the Upg Cloud Services with the ECQX and ECMON. We'll look at the system security in August, best practices. And then we've got a QX debug webinar for the SIP trunks and troubleshooting towards the end of August. All right, as far as the agenda today, buckle up. It's going to be a long session. It's for it's a 3-hour, scheduled it to be a 3-hour session, and we're going to be covering a lot of information. Intro to Upg Technologies. We'll look at the support portal and Upg technical support. Look at the installation and initial setup of the product, and I'll take you through most of the basic QX GUI menu items, which includes the extension management, the IP phone configuration, the auto attendant, the call flow for incoming and outgoing call handling via the FXO and SIP trunks, and we'll look at the call routing table and followed up with a little bit of maintenance items. All right, an overview with Upg, just briefly. It's a privately held American company. We've been around for quite some time, founded in 2000. Got excellent engineers, developers, and we've one thing people don't realize is our product is 100% developed by Upg, both the hardware and software. We're founded in Texas. Our headquarters is in Orlando. We have offices in Yerevan, Armenia, and also in Dallas. We have, since it has been developed 100% by Upg, we have proprietary hardware and software. Its platform is not based on an open source platform like Asterisk. And we've been shipping PBXs and gateways appliances for the last 20 years. So it is a mature, feature-rich, cost-effective solution, and it's well supported. And we've also done external development services. We've offered services to third-party companies. And we've recently, actually over the last couple of years, we've really introduced and enhanced our cloud service offerings, which includes the PBX-based ECQX, that's the cloud-based PBX, and ECMON, which is a monitoring platform. All right, we have different verticals that we focus on, like contact centers, hospitalities, education, retail, a lot of different verticals like that. All right, we're going to go ahead and let's take a look at the website just briefly. So we've got the various products. By clicking on the products, you'll see the different all the different the products there. You get the cloud-based products, which is the ECQX. Okay, and then we have the and as we are going to have a session coming up on the ECQX, but all the features, bells and whistles that you come to really enjoy on the premise-based system, it's also available on the hosted platform. All right, the lineup of the basic PBXs starts with our QX20, which has which can go to a total of 32 IP phones. QX50 can grow to a total of 50 phones, 48 of which will be IP phones. Then you got the QX200, 200 IP phones, QX500, which is all IP based, will have a total of can grow to 500 IP phones. Then we have the QX3000 and QX5000. All right, and so as you're sizing the system that you need, you want to take a look at the not only the number of IP phones that it supports, but also the concurrent call volume. That's the number of simultaneous calls that the system itself will support. All right, for the systems, they are small, compact. You can get a rack mount kit or a rack mount. So you can put the systems all in a one single enclosure, and it has 4 different slots in it. So each system would fit nicely into each slot. We also have the gateways. I'm not going to go into all these in too much detail, but we have an FXO 4-port gateway. We have an E1 T1 gateway, and then a 24-port analog FXS gateway for those that still need a lot of analog phones, and the ISDN gateway. All right, I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to go through all these menu items. You can come back later and take a look at these. Under support, there's the support portal, support plans. The way Apogee does support is very similar to our sales model. Apogee sells product directly to our distributors, and the distributors will in turn sell product to the resellers, and the resellers in turn will sell product to the end users and customers. And we do support basically the same way. If an end customer needs support, they would contact their local reseller that did the installation for them. And then if the reseller needs support, they can contact their distributor or direct with Apogee via a support ticket. So we have different support plans in place where the resellers can open a ticket with us and provide all the information that's needed. And the support ticketing, that's done through the support portal, which we're going to take a look at next. So that you can come in here, you can register. There's no obligation to register. If you haven't done so previously, you want to go ahead and do that. Then when you go to log in, it'll ask for your email account and password. Okay, so you've got the basic items within the menus within the portal, where you can view and submit your support tickets, news items, knowledge base. We'll come back and take a look at that. You can get the latest firmware. There's a forum and the various paid support plans. All right, so with the knowledge base, you'll see several folders. The one most you'll probably be most interested in will be the QX line. And then you can select whether you're looking at the PBX products or the gateway products. There's also marketing materials, sales presentations, some technical webinars. So we look at the PBX products and then the QX200. You can find the technical data sheets, product images and logos, the manuals. There's 3 manuals. There's the installation manual or installation guide, followed by the more detailed administrator's guide. and then a user guide, which would talk about more things like features and things like that and how to configure those. If you need the latest firmware, you just go in here, click on the firmware that's needed. This is the 6.3.14 is the latest version. You will definitely want to open and take a look at the software release notes, which we're going to do now. All right, let me go ahead and open that. All right, so here's the slide that over so we can all see that. Okay, this is the QX50/QX200 software release notes, software version 6.3.14. All right, let me just scroll down here a bit. One of the things I often get asked is what type of IP phones are supported with the UpG product. And the best place to find the latest latest information with all the list of all the phones is to just open up the release notes, and you'll see that here it has the different vendors, the models, our recommended firmware version. And the reason we put that out there is we know with this software version on the QX6314, this was the particular version that we tested with on the phone model, and it we do put that out there because if you do have problems, then you want to go ahead and maybe even upgrade, or in most cases you're going to downgrade if possible to our recommended firmware, because we know at that point that was a good stable working version for both the QX and the phone platform. Every now and then we will go through and update the firmware on the phones. The phones are changing firmware quite often, and we will periodically update the firmware that we're testing with. Okay, we can't go through and test all the phones every time that they put out a new firmware version. That's just not going to work. And it mentions whether the phone supports plug and play via multicast or whether it's via the DHCP, and whether it'll auto configure to the system. Okay, so there's the, you see the Alcatel audio codes, Cisco Fanville phones, Grandstream, H-Tech, iServe, Mitel/Astra, Polycom, Snom, VTech, G-Link. So there's the list is quite extensive. And in the software release notes, you can find information as we add new features. You can see for 6.3.14, we've added, you can see the list of features that were added or updated. We did a lot of enhancements for call parking. We added some new phones, things like that. There's also a little further down, there's a section here for any features that have changed. So if we put out a release and there's certain options that maybe work a little bit differently now, we will go ahead and mention that. And then lastly, there's a section for any the items that have been reported that are fixed, and then of course any known or outstanding items that are still out there, and possibly some workarounds for those items. Okay, let's go back. Take a look at, let's do a search for IP space phones. And let's see, there's several documents that come to mind. For it shows how to configure the phones using VPN. It shows there's one document in particular that I'd like to bring your attention to. All right, and this is the QX IPPBX features on the Epigee supported IP phones list. Okay, let me see if I can bring that document up. All right, we're just going to go ahead and download it here real quick. It'll only take a moment. You click on the link, the document, you confirm the agreement, the terms, and then click on the document again, and it will the link and it will open. Okay, QX IPPBX features on the Epigee supported IP phones list. All right. The reason I'd like to highlight this document, it has a lot of good information in it. Let me just scroll down a good bit. You'll see a real busy looking chart down around page 13. It shows all the, on the left hand side, all the different phone models. And then going across the top, it shows different options, features, and whether or not those are supported by that phone. For example, whether it does automatic firmware version control, whether it's a video phone, whether it makes a good receptionist phone, whether it supports paging, intercom. So you've got all these features that are listed. Okay, then there's a similar section. There's another section down below. It gives some more specifics about each phone, like the number of keys that it supports, whether watched extensions, if that works, do not disturb, on the call recording, whether you can put a key on your phone for that. So it gives a list of all those. And then if you look at the specifics for each different phone, all right, so let's say if we, this morning we'll take a look at maybe one of the E-Links, the T46S and G. It tells you specifically how to accomplish certain functions that you might be trying to do with call handling. For example, I mean, it's pretty simple to put a call on hold and resume. Pick up a second call, that's usually pretty easy. But then when you start doing the transfers, that can vary from one phone to the next. So this will tell you step by step how to do a blind transfer, consultative transfer, call parking, whether you do the call parking by simply pressing the call park key, or whether or not you have to do a transfer to initiate that. All right, so yeah, that's a good document to take a look at. Okay, there's another document. If you search on the word secure, the title of these documents should catch your attention, but the one I like to highlight is this one here where it says preventing unauthorized access and calls on the Epigee QX IPPBXs. Okay, it's we've done a lot of work as far as security goes. I really think that we are ahead of the curve somewhat. All right, we've done, like I said, we've done a lot of work, and by default, the system is going to be secure, but you want to make sure that you maintain that security as you begin adding new functionality, features, and expanding the system and opening it up a little bit. And some of those features work externally. We have remote phones and they need to call into the system. So how do you do that and still keep systems, secure? because the threat is real. There are people out there every day trying to access these systems and trying to make phone calls. It's very easy to, for people to attempt to do that. So we've done a lot of work on the security, and we'll go ahead and we're going to highlight some of those things as we go along. Okay. All right, then another. Uh, there's several guides. I'm not going to go through all this, but you can come back and take a look at it as you have time. All right, so next what we'll look at is we'll actually log into a QX200 that I have here at my office. Okay, and with the QX200, when you initially go to log into it, you're going to log in through the LAN port, LAN, and you're going to want to um, the IP for the LAN port on the QX by default, and I'm just going to type it in here in this login page. It's 172.30.0.1. You can see it there. I wrote it in the username. So that's the IP that you're going to connect to. But before you do that, you'll need to first set a static IP on your PC of a 172.30.0.100. And once you do that, you'll be able to log into the .1. Okay, I'm actually connected through my system to my system through the WAN port on a 192.168.1.185, and that IP is given to me through the through my local network. Okay. When you go to log in, there's a you can log in with admin. We also have a second login. It's called local admin. So you can give a certain privileges to whether and what extent what they're allowed to access. Okay, by default, the local admin is disabled. Okay, so you can enable it and you can option what settings they're allowed to access. Okay, you see where it's you have the option of logging in with your extension. So in this case, it would be, let's say your extension is 100 and then your voicemail password, and then that would put you into the user interface where you'd be able to see, get a visual of your voicemails, and you can manage those there locally. You could also change some of your features like call forwarding. Okay, by default that access is turned off, so you'd want to you can go back and enable that. Okay, so let's go ahead and log in with admin. Let me just turn that off here a moment. PowerPoint slideshow. Okay, so let's I've logged in as admin QX200. This is the dashboard page. It would show any active calls. Okay, on the system, it shows me the firmware version. I'm on 6.3.18. It shows me who's logged in. You can have multiple users all logged in at the same time from different IPs, doing different things throughout the system. Okay, at the top, you'll see the time. There's a shortcut menu that can take you directly to one of your extensions. That's the user interface of one of your extensions. Any pending events, it shows me that I'm logged in as administrator. There's my logout button. There's a help page on any of your menus that you're currently on. There's a help page that you can access. Okay, and then There's also a drop down over here on the right where you can bring up the feature codes. So as you begin learning the system and you look at the different, you're not familiar with the feature codes, you can use this page. I mean, it's also in the documentation, but you could use this page to show you like different features and how to access them. If I were to click on any one of these, it would give you more details on it. All right. So it has, and it's broken down. So, your different feature codes, for example, for call forwarding, it's *4. And so you get to see all the list of different options. Also the auto tenant feature codes that are available when you're using the basic default auto tenant. And also voicemail feature codes. I think those probably a little bit further down when you're during a call. All right, so here's voicemail services. Click on that one, and it gives me all the different options when you're in your voicemail, what options are available to you. All right, we'll come back and take a look at that a little bit later. We'll leave that for now. Actually, we'll let you come back and look at that in more detail if needed. Okay, the menus are grouped according to function. On the left-hand side, you've got your dashboard, basic, the setup menus, the extensions, the interfaces, telephony items, firewall, network status, and maintenance. Okay, on the if I go to setup, you'll see that when you first go into the menu, it gives you an overview page. It shows you some basic information. Okay, and then you can click on any one of those items right there. It'll take you directly to that page, or at the top you can go to click on basic setup, and then you'll see the different options available. Okay, under basic setup, you've got the LAN settings. Let's take a look at that initially. You can change the host name. You give that something more familiar to you when you go to log into that system. That host name will also be attached as to the file name when you download your system configuration file. Maybe when you download the system logs, you'll see that that host name attached to it. And then you've got the system, the IP address. There's a 172.30.0.1. You can change it if needed, but that's the default. Next page, you've got the you can enable the DHCP server, so next time you won't need to give yourself a static IP. It would automatically assign one to you. And then you put in your time zone, or, your location and time zone. And then on this page, you typically see like if there's any emergency codes for 911 or maybe for dial 9. I usually tend to delete those, and I'd like to add those later manually in the call routing table. If you leave them here on this page, they're actually going to those are the emergency access codes that will be used to access the FXO ports. So if you're configuring SIP trunks, you'll need another entry for those. So I just go ahead and remove those, and typically I will add those later. When you hit click finish, it will go through and it's going to update all the settings, and then you do need to confirm the settings. If you don't do so within 20 minutes, it will roll back to whatever settings that were there previously. All right, next item is the under basic setup is the WAN or Internet Configuration Wizard. and you can leave this page by default as is. You can set whether or not the WAN port is going to get an IP address automatically from your DHCP server on your network, or whether you're going to assign it a static IP address. So the systems, they all have a LAN and a WAN port, so that way they also have a router/firewall functionality. The system can stand alone on a public IP, so if you needed to, you can give it a public IP here. It's always good to make sure that the system has a static IP address that's not going to change. All right, and then the MAC address for the device, you can leave that as is. The external DNS server, so if it needs to resolve to your SIP trunk, the host name, or resolve to epg.com. This is the DNS server, your provider's DNS server that it's going to use to resolve that. Again, you can press finish and then confirm the settings. Next is date and time. By default, the system will go out and contact ntp1.epg.com every 6 hours or so and update its time accordingly. If you want to set it manually, you would need to turn off the SNTP client, and then you could set the time manually. And it will also act as a time server to any of the devices on its LAN. These are your email settings. So one of the functions of the system is that it is capable of sending email. Okay, one of the most common functions of that is voicemail to email. So before the system can send an email, it would first need to have an email account. Just like you and I need an email account before we can send an email, the system also would need an email account. And this is where you'd provision those, configure those settings. So this is an example of a Gmail account, and it does require authentication. You put the email and email password down at the bottom. If your system it's also capable of sending out text messages for different notifications, events. For example, to notify you if the system, if there was some phones that weren't configured or whatever it might be, you can configure the system event logs to send you a notification on that. You can also get a notification via when you receive a voicemail. But before that text message can go out, you do need to configure the system to work with a provider that's going to send those text messages. And sometimes that's probably a paid service. All right. Next is the ECMon Epg Cloud Monitoring Platform. So I've enabled this system so it is available on the ECMon, so I can access it that way. And the ECMon it's a really good tool. You can save your configs. It can notify you if the system's not available. You can get access to the system when it's on a private network. You can see you can update the firmware. You can see which firmware it's on. You can see the phones. So it has a lot of information available on it. Next is the system security. So by default, as I mentioned, we've done a lot of work on the security front. This is a system security mechanism management page. By default, the security will be set to medium, and it's going to enforce anytime you go to enter a password within the system. It's going to make sure that you enter a good password that's at least of a medium strength. Okay, that way you're not entering weak passwords. It's going to enforce a real good, strong password. All right, so if you do need to There are cases if you're doing some testing and you just want to use a simple password, so you make sure it's typed in correctly, you can use 1234. You can do that, but first you need to change the security setting to low and then go back and change that password. License features. By default, the system's going to come with probably most all the features that you're going to need. It's feature rich, but there are certain enhanced features that we don't include in the price of the basic system. So you can come back and activate those particular licenses with a software license key. If you do need a license key to activate a feature, you're going to send a serial number of your system, which actually is written on the bottom of the unit. You're going to send the serial number and or this unique ID. Okay, this unique ID will also identify your system, and we can generate a license key with those. So you're going to send those to that request, the purchase order. You'll send that to your distributor, who in turn will send that to Epigee, and we'll generate that license key for you within a day and get that turned around. All right, there's third-party call control. That's more so for developers that need access to the system call manager to initiate phone calls and watch different activity within the system. There's a basic ACD, that's automatic call distribution for your call centers. As an enhancement to the ACD, we also have down below we have the EAC, Epigee ACD console. That gives agents full functionality, like a full-blown enterprise-grade call center, so that they can log in, they can see their, they can change their states, they can, the supervisor can have full control, they can do chat, they can have inbound calls, outbound calls. So it has a lot of functionality. You can see their metrics and all that. Okay, so that's the EAC. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on all these, but you got bargain. That's typically for call centers to create a bargain where a supervisor can listen in on a phone call and even offer some assistance to the agent during the call. Redundancy. So if you need redundancy, if you need one system backing up another unit, that's the redundancy license key. A hotel console, call costing, desktop communications console, both the pro version and the basic. That allows you to see other users all on one page. You'll be able to see the different extensions, whether they're online or talking or not. You got the eQall, which is actually free. Basic eQall is available for your iPhones and Android phones, but the toggling is what is licensed. So you want to bounce that call between your local phone, your desk phone, and without dropping the call and handing it off to your cell phone, you can do that using the eQall toggling option. You can move the call. You can be on a call and you can move it from your desk phone to your cell phone and vice versa, just by pressing that toggling key and not interrupting the call. Additional IP phones. We have an auto dialer, which actually has been updated more so with the enhancements through the automatic outbound calling. Audio conference server. eQall. So with everybody working from home now, they want a desk soft phone to put on their PC, so that we have that available. We have it also available for Android. And hopefully by end of the year, maybe first quarter, we'll have it available for iOS for your iPhones. All right, and then so we're working on that. We'll also have call recording and video conferencing. So a lot of enhancements there that are available. Any of these can be optioned for a 30-day trial. You could do it here within the system, or we can send you a trial license key. If you're doing redundancy, these are your settings here, and then also language pack if you needed to change the prompts to different language, for example, like Spanish. All right, let's take a look at the extensions. Okay, if I click on extensions, so when you first go into the extensions management page, you'll see a list of all the we'll give you a list of all the default. We're going to go ahead and create and populate the page and with all of our default extensions and assign all the different IP lines. We'll go ahead and map that out. If you don't like the way we've done the assignment of the extensions, maybe you want we're going to have extensions beginning with 100 or 103. Maybe you want your extensions in the 200 range. Maybe you want 4-digit extensions. And by the way, you can have a mix and match of 2, 3, 4, 5-digit extensions. You're not limited as far as the size of your extensions, and they don't all have to be 3-digit or all have to be 4-digit. They can be a combination of different extension lengths. Okay, so when you first go in here, and if you don't like the numbering that you see, you can first thing you could do is just put a check beside all these, and just uncheck the auto tenant, and then you can just delete them all. Just start afresh. If you do that, there's an option at the very top. It says add multiple extensions, and you can do that. You have to specify anytime you add an extension, whether it's a single extension or multiple extensions, you have to specify how that extension will be used within the system. Whether or not that extension is going to be used for an auto tenant. Yes, you can have multiple auto tenants. Whether or not it's going to be a regular user extension, whether it's going to be, we also use extensions for features. For example, like call pickups, call pickup groups, call park, paging, and also call recording. And if you're going to add some extensions, you can specify how many extensions you're going to use, which extension you're starting from, say 200, and if you're also going to assign that extension to an IP line, which you will. So you specify which IP line it's going to start with. If I were to enter this, and I'm not, it would start, you'd get 10 extensions, 200 to 209, all going from IP line 1 to IP line 10. So you can create those extensions in bulk if needed. All right, so looking at the table, so it has at the top has your auto tenants. As you can see, I've got several different auto tenants, extensions. As I mentioned, we use extensions for features. So you can see some call pickup groups down at the bottom, call park, paging, and also call recording. The extensions are assigned to a line, the attached line. In this case, you'll see some of them are assigned to different IP phones or IP lines, as we refer to them in a system. Extension 120 and 130, those are assigned to the FXS ports. Those are the analog FXS ports on the front of the QX200. It has a couple of FXS phones, analog phones. And then you'll see a couple of extensions where, like extension 250, that's configured for a general voicemail box, and that extension, we refer to it as a virtual extension, simply because it is not assigned to an IP phone or analog phone. Virtual extensions are very useful. You're going to find that you're going to use those quite often, maybe to receive incoming calls. You'll direct those to your virtual extension. The virtual extension will in turn maybe ring several phones in the office. And as this one is, it can be configured for maybe the general voicemail box. Um, and then it shows going across the top how much memory is allocated to each extension based on a percentage of our overall system memory. So for 1% of memory, it's given, this extension is given 5 hours and 20 seconds worth of voicemail storage capacity. And then you'll notice as you go across, you'll see these red links. As I move my mouse over, it changes to a pointer, a link that I can click on. On the far right side, you've got the list of codecs for a given extension. If I click on that link, it takes me to a new page. And on this page, it'll show me all the different codecs that are available for this extension. So this extension 120, when it goes to initiate a phone call, these are the voice codecs that are available. There's G711, both North American, which is the MU-Law, and European A-Law, and G729. So you can, the codec that's listed at the very top, that's going to be your primary codec or preferred codec. So when this extension 120 goes to initiate a phone call, it's more than likely it's going to use G.711. And then you've got other codecs here that probably aren't, that you probably won't be using. And then some options that are provisioned at the bottom for method of sending DTMF digits, whether or not, if it's a fax, if it's going to use T38 or not. Okay, the order, and like a lot of our tables, the order that these are presented is important. So you can put a check beside it, and you can move up, move down, or maybe even move it to the top of the list and make it the preferred codec. All right. Let's go ahead and we're going to do an edit on one of these extensions. Maybe this extension 103. You'll see these two little icons here to the right of the extension number. The first one is the user settings, and the second one is the administrator settings. The user settings is where you're going to see basic settings for the extension. The user can access those for voicemail, call forwarding settings, things like that. The other is the administrative type settings that are only allowed to be accessed by the system administrator. So I can put it, just click on that icon. We'll go and do an edit on this extension 103. This is the display name that will be used for caller ID purposes. There is a password here. This is the user's voicemail password. By default, it is blank, regardless of how many bullets that are in there. By default, it's blank. You don't need to update that password. You don't need to know what it is. That password will be updated by the user when when they go to access their voicemail the first time. They'll be prompted to change that password. They'll also be prompted to record their greetings as well as their voicemails. And then you can assign the extension to the IP phone that it'll be using, or if it's a virtual extension, you set it to none. A couple options here. One is use kickback. If you enable this option, this comes into play when the user is doing a call transfer. Okay, so if the user transfers a phone call and they transfer that call to an extension, if that extension doesn't answer, then after 3 or 4 rings, that caller is going to go to the voicemail box of that extension. All right, that's pretty common. However, if you transfer the call and you have this option enabled on your extension, use kickback. After 3 or 4 rings, it's going to come back to you as a returned phone call. That gives the receptionist some different options to handle that call. Puts a little bit more of a personal touch on that call, so that the user can, or the receptionist, they can, say so-and-so is not available. Would you like me to transfer you? Would you like to leave a message on their voicemail? Then that you could do a direct transfer to voicemail. You can take a message, you can transfer to somebody else. So you have all these different options. Next one is call relay. So with that option enabled, this allows you to make an external call from outside the system. So if you're outside the office, you're on your cell phone and you get a message saying you need to call a customer, the tendency would be to just call them directly from your cell phone. It's not a good option because at that point, the customer would have your cell phone number and they'll be calling you all hours or texting you all hours of the day and night next time that they need you. So instead of doing that, you can call back through the office and use the call relay option. So you call in, you need to reach our one of our default auto tenants, and you'd press *2, which is the call relay feature code. It will prompt you for your extension, in this case 103. It'll ask for your extension password, and then if you have this option enabled on your extension, at that point it will allow you to call that customer, and the caller ID is going to show up as if the call had originated from the office itself, as if you're sitting at your desk. Okay, so that's the call relay. Next is the allow GUI login. So it's very simple. If you've enabled that checkbox, the user can, on the front login page of the screen, they can put in their extension 103 and their voicemail, the password, and they'll be able to log in and see their some of their options. Next one is a third-party call control. Click to allow access that might be needed for certain features. Show on public directory. This is just simply whether or not this extension will show up on the directory of the other phones in the office, so it's visible or not. We have a feature in the system, it's called parent-child. This allows you to basically match this extension up with another extension, another parent extension. Okay, the usefulness of this comes into play if you have a local phone and maybe a remote phone as well, using our software, a soft phone called eQall. So at that point, you have 2 different extensions, 2 different IP lines, and then through this parent-child, you're able to match the child extension up with a one or with the parent extension. Okay, you can have several different child extensions, all subscribing or matched to the same single parent extension. And what that does for you is anytime you get an incoming call, it's going to ring both of those extensions. Okay, that's not too big of a deal because you can do that with other features. But the benefit comes into play when you go to originate an outbound call, the caller ID will always show as if the call had originated from the parent extension. Okay, so that makes it real useful. And then lastly, if there's, you can set an allocation of how much memory you're going to allow for this user on a percentage basis to have to be available for voicemail. All right, so at this point, let's take a look at the, let's just scroll down a little bit. We'll come back to the auto tenant settings. So some features at the bottom. One of these is call pickup. So you can create an extension, and let's see if we do an edit on it. There's an extension list in the general settings of for the pickup group. You can define which extensions are included within this group. Okay, the way this works is anytime any one of these extensions is ringing, in this case 100, 101, 102, 106, any of those 4 extensions is ringing, you can answer that call by simply dialing extension 151. Okay, so that's useful if you're sitting at your desk and you hear some phone ringing down the other end of the hall. You don't want to have to get up and run down there and try to answer it every time the phone rings. So you're sitting there after hours and you're the only one there, then you want to pick up that phone call. You can do so just by creating a pickup group and just dialing the extension for the pickup group. Next option is call park. Okay, real useful option. We've made some enhancements to this lately. So call park will simply allow you to temporarily put a call on hold and assign it to have it parked to a particular call park extension. Okay, so you can create as many of these call park extensions as needed. You can assign those to different keys on users' phones. You can even have different departments having their own call park extensions. So that's pretty common. Maybe the sales team, they're going to have 3 call park extensions, and everybody in the sales department, they're all going to have those 3 call park extensions on their phone. Maybe for the accounting and the support team, same for each department. That way, when a receptionist answers a call, he or she could simply park it to the sales team by pressing one of their call park keys. Okay, so you receive a call. It's for the sales department. You press the call park key, say 150 or 155. At that point, the call would be parked. And now the call would be on hold, and the receptionist is freed up to make other calls. And at that point, they would need to notify, make a call to the sales department and let them know that they've got a park waiting for them. And anybody in that sales team, they could look down on their phone, they could see the call park key is now lit. They press that key and answer the call. So that announcement is probably done through a page or maybe a direct phone call. But we have enhanced that a bit, so you can, if you look at the call park settings, and if you look at the general settings, first of all, there's a timeout, a retrieve timeout, so you can define how long that call park, that caller is going to be sitting there parked on that extension, how long they're going to be parked, and after that timeout, let's say after 3 minutes, okay, that would be 180 seconds. After that timeout expires, you can have that call come back and ring some other extension, or maybe a virtual extension that might ring several phones in the office, or maybe the entire the extensions of all the sales team or something like that. All right, so that's the callback pushback number. And then when the call is initially parked, you can create a paging group. So now the receptionist no longer has to do the page says, sales pick up on park 1. The receptionist, that can be handled by the call park extension itself. So you create you'll record a file, the message that's actually going to be played for this particular extension. So in this case, maybe it might say sales pickup on Park 2. And so when the receptionist parks the call, it will make that announcement. And over here on the left, you can create the paging group. You can add the different extensions that are going to be paged when that call is parked. Okay, so that's the call parking. Lastly, you can create a paging group. So you simply dial extension 150 and it will do a page across all the extensions in the paging group that's defined here on this extension list. So you can define each extension that it will do the page across the speaker of those phones. It can also page across the audio. On the front of the system, there's an audio line out jack, and that audio line out will go directly into the external paging system, maybe for an overhead page. So you can page to an overhead system, external paging system as well, that will have amplifiers and speakers. And to do the page, just dial 150 and you'll be speaking across those extensions. There's also a store and forward option. So instead of doing a live page, you can record the page and then you'll press pound to send the page. Or if you have this checkbox enabled, send a page on call or disconnect, you just record the page, hang up, and then that page will be sent out across all those phones. The benefit for this is if you've got a paging extension that's heavily used, the pages will basically queue up and they'll go out one after the other, rather than people trying to wait for the paging to be completed. The initial page, maybe there's a page in progress. Instead of having to wait for that one to be completed, you can just go ahead and do the page and it would store it and then send it out after it's completed, one right after the other. All right, so that's pretty much it for the extensions that I wanted to cover here initially. But now let's look at configuring the IP phones. So when you go to do the configure the IP phones, there's several different methods of configuring the phones. Let's take a look at those. Okay, one method is you've got the system and it's connected, the WAN port of the system is connected to the customer's data network. The data network has a switch, it has a firewall. So you're basically connected to the LAN of that firewall. The firewall has an external port that goes out to the internet through the broadband connection. And that allows the system to get outside access to the internet, to update the time, to configure SIP trunks, so things like that, voicemail. So it can have external outside access to the internet. So that firewall is also acting as a DHCP server. It provides IPs to all the phones and PCs in the office. So the phones will configure through that WAN port. In this case, the system LAN port would not even be used. Okay, so that's one configuration. You could also do that same setup, but in this case you're going to be using a VLAN. This is a great way to segregate the traffic from the PCs and the phones. That way they don't interfere with each other, and you won't have problems with the voice quality because some users downloading the latest movie that just came out, they're downloading the whole thing and basically using a good majority of the broadband connection for that. So that would be one way. It's a real popular. You can put the phones in a VLAN, and the PBX can actually act as the DHCP server across that VLAN, so it can hand out IPs to that VLAN, to all the phones within that VLAN. Okay, the next option is going to put the phones on the LAN of the PBX. The downside to this is you might have a separate switch just for the phones. The WAN side would still be connected to the user's data network, and you can get outside access that way. All right, you can connect phones remotely. So here you can see on the top right-hand corner, the phones will connect through the system via the WAN port out through the internet, and they'll reach the customer's remote office, and you can configure those phones as remote extensions. Okay, the one method for configuring those phones that works well is to use a open VPN. So the system acts as an open VPN server, and it helps with all the firewall type issues that you might run into where the phones are located, and even where the system might be located. Okay, another option, maybe the system is directly connected, instead of connected to the customer's data network, maybe it's directly connected to the internet. So that would be yet another method. Okay, so several different ways of configuring the phones depending on the type of network that you're going to be installing into. So with that, let's go to the phones and how do you configure those. We're going to go to interfaces. We'll click on IP lines, and you'll see a list of all the different IP lines available. This is a QX200. There's 24 IP lines available by default, and the remaining IP lines, you can see they're all grayed out. They're disabled. I would need to get an IP license key to enable those additional IP lines, and those license keys are available in increments of 4, 8, 16, 32, etc., going right up to in greater increments. All right, there's excuse me. So there's several different ways of a couple different methods of configuring the phones. First thing you want to take a look at, the first setting that you'll want to option is under the IP line settings. First of all, there's the plug and play. You may want that enabled so the phones get automatically configured by the PBX. I had mine off for testing purposes. There's the automatic firmware version control. That's where the QX will automatically upgrade or downgrade that phone to our recommended firmware version. And there's some phones that we're going to do that with, and some models that we are supported, and some are not. All right, and then there's a setting. It says configure the IP phones from. So basically, you have to tell the system whether the phones are going to be physically reside on the LAN port or on the WAN port. If you've created a VLAN, you can also specify whether or not the phones will be configured to the VLAN port. This is an important setting because the system is going to provide a configuration file to those phones, and it will provide the IP address based on how you option this setting. So the system IP address will be given to the phone based on what you provision here. All right, let's look at the IP lines. So there's three methods that the phones can be configured to the system. The very first being plug and play. That's where you take the phone out of the box, connect it to the system, the phone powers up, and the system automatically sees the phone out there on the network, and it automatically gets configured to the very next extension that's available. If I were to connect a phone right now, it would come up as IP line 12 and extension number 302. The reason being, that's the first IP line that has an extension assigned to it, and it's also not being used. Okay, and that would be the only one that would configure as plug and play. The others would need to have an extension assigned to it first. Okay, the second method, so that's plug and play. Second method we refer to as auto configure. So that's where I've got a phone in my hand and I want to assign this phone model to a very specific extension. Maybe the phone is unique. Maybe it's a receptionist type phone. Has a few more keys on it. So for that phone, I would go in and choose the IP line. Click on the IP line that I'll be using. Click on the IP phone. And then there's a drop-down box here for the phone model. So I need to specifically choose which phone model I'm going to be using. Okay, this is a very long list, very impressive list of phones that we will support, and all these phones we're going to configure. A lot of these are even older models that are still there in the system. So you choose which phone model you're going to be using, and you enter the MAC address. Okay, whatever that MAC address might be. You enter that, and at that point, you specify how many line appearances. That's how many simultaneous calls the phone's going to make. There's a username and password. By default, we're going to create a good, strong password, and that's important because you don't want somebody guessing what your username and password might be. This username is short for local extension 302, so that's pretty easy to figure out. And if you had a simple password like 302 or 1234, somebody could actually guess at that, and believe me, they do try. So you want to have a good, strong password. If you don't like the password that's there, you can use our password generator, which will actually generate a good, strong password for you. You can see that up here at the top right-hand corner. And so you could choose one of these good, strong passwords, and that's the password that will be used. Okay, at that point you save your settings. And then go back to the previous page. So now you can see the extension 302 as a phone model, has the MAC address, and now I can connect that phone to the system, and it's going to come up as we're going to recognize it, and it's going to come up as extension 302. Okay. Now there's going to be some devices out there that you're going to want to use with the system, and it's not one of our not so much recommended, it's not one of the phones that we have fully supported where we're going to configure it. We haven't done testing on it where we're going to configure that phone model to the system. Okay, not a big deal. There's many phones out there that we have not provisioned. There's a lot of different devices. There's door stations, there's cameras, and all these SIP-enabled type devices. They're all going to work. There won't be a problem with making basic phone calls and things like that. But we're not going to provision that phone. We're not going to configure it. You'll have to manually configure that phone, which is really pretty simple. It's just about 4 settings that you'll need to enter. But on the drop-down list, you're not going to, if you don't find that model, you just use the very last option here called Other. The MAC address gets grayed out. At that point, you're going to have a username, and you will need to know what that password is, because at this point, you will need to configure that same username and password as well as the QX IP address. You'll need to configure that into the settings of that device before it will work. So no problem if there's some devices out there that aren't listed on our drop-down menu. They'll still work. Okay, once the phone is provisioned, one of the benefits of using one of the models that we do provision is over here on the right-hand side. You'll see there's an MPK reboot and web option. If I click web, it would take me to the login page of that phone, provided my PC and the phone are all in the same subnet. I can reboot that phone. And then there's the MPK settings. These are multifunctional programmable keys, okay? Fancy name for being able to say we can program these individual keys. If you click on it, actually this is the Polycom, the VVX 1500. Let's take a look at maybe a different model, maybe like a MPK for a Yealink. So in these keys, you get a drop-down list. First of all, it has the keys. It has all the keys that are supported by this phone model. There's 27 keys available. And then typically you're going to leave keys 1 and 2, leave them as they are pre-configured. You're not going to change those. Those will probably be used by the user to make and receive their incoming and outgoing calls to their extension. So just leave them as is, maybe start with key 3, key 4. And then you've got a drop-down list of all the different options that you can put on that key. You'll see these watched extensions. That's also known within the industry. You'll hear those referred to as BLF keys. So you can see if you use one of these keys, you'll be able to see the status of that extension, whether it's on a call, or whether it's idle, whether the extension is ringing. You can also place a call to that extension by pressing that specified key. And this list will grow as you begin adding new extensions. Okay, then you've got the different features like your call park extensions, shared mailbox extensions, scheduling keys. So you have all those keys available to you. All right, and then you can, if it has a value, for example, like if it's going to do a speed dial key or a prefix key, you would specify the value that would be the digits that would be sent. And then you're going to define the label that's on those keys. So if it's a soft key, it'll have a label that you can put on there for reference for the user. And after we change these keys, okay, so after you do a change, you press save, and then the phone needs to reboot, because when you make these changes within the system, the phone doesn't know about it. So the phone needs to reboot to get the new configuration file with all those different added key assignments that you have. So I'm not going to reboot this phone, but generally you would. Okay. So that's how you configure the keys on the phones. Okay. We also do have templates. Okay. If we go over here at the top, there's IP phone templates. I can create a custom template. I can have multiple custom templates. If I have different behaviors on different phone models, or similar phone models, I should say. If you want behavior on you can have different templates. So let me explain what I mean by that. So you can go in here and it has all the different vendors on the left hand side. For example, if I click on SNUM, you'll see in the general settings it has different features like number display style. This is the format for your caller ID, by the way. So if you have a SNUM phone, by default, it's only going to show the caller's name. You can show the name and number, or the number followed by the name. So these settings are taken directly out of the phone's configuration file. And we put them here on this page. These are special settings that people have requested. They say, hey, everything you configure the phones, that's great. But there's this one option that I always change on the phone models, and I need to have that change. So instead of having you go around and change that setting and log into each individual phone, we put those settings here on this page to allow you to change particular options and behaviors of phones. Okay, so you got the general settings, and then you can choose the particular the phone model. So if it's like a SNOME 720, you can configure certain keys and how they're going to be provisioned and how they're going to look across every time you configure a SNOME 720. You can have certain keys all be the same. All right, so you use that, and that way it makes it a little bit easier for you. Once you create this template, and if you're going to use it, you do need to go in here and change the default template from the system default to the new custom template that you created. That way, anytime you go to create a phone, it will use the custom template, the one that's set by default. Okay, let's give me 1 second here. Okay, the extension 108 is being currently used for eQall. eQall is the Apogee soft phone that we came out with, all right, earlier this year. So let's see how you provision this phone. So you just go in here and choose the phone model as Apogee eQall from the drop-down list. Of course, it's going to have a username, a good strong password. And once you configure that phone and save it, it's going to give you this QR code, this square QR code. I know you've seen those around. So you can configure the phone by simply saving this QR code. You save this image, you save that image as a file, save it to your desktop, and then you get our eQall software, which is available on the support portal. It's under the knowledge base, software applications, and then there's the eQall for Windows and the eQall for Android. So if I click on the eQall for Windows, there is a There's a user guide here, shows you how to configure it, release notes, and then the software which you can install on your PC. Okay, so once you install that, the eQall, and you've set that save that QR code. Now all you have to do is install eQall on your PC. Go to Settings, go to Accounts. You can have multiple accounts if you were using across different systems. You can have extensions on different systems. More than likely, you're not going to need that. But in here, you just go in here and click on this Add Accounts, and just click select the QR code, and then find the file that you had saved previously. It just takes you to the file. All right, so once you do that, it's going to load that file, and it's going to have all the settings that it needs to work with the QX. So let's take a look at it a moment. This is the if you have multiple accounts, you could set which one's going to be the default. You can edit whether or not it's active or not. This is just a slide bar. You can make it inactive or active. You can edit the some settings on the account, whether or not it's going to use the outbound proxy server or the stun server. And then it has a list of all the, it knows about all the different IP addresses of the system. And in this case, you can define whether or not those are going to be used. You can also move them up or down accordingly as far as which, so it knows about the QX LAN IP address, the WAN IP address. It's going to know, and you can choose which preference it'll be using. So it'll always be able to find its way back to the PBX, so it doesn't have to worry about firewalls and those things. Okay, and the while we're here, we'll look at the settings, general settings, whether or not it'll start automatically. You can choose your audio device or video device when we have that. Troubleshooting, if you have a problem, you can send the logs to us. Click send logs. It would send an email to us with the log file. You could do a software update where it'll automatically update to the latest software. It's already checked. It says I do have the, it is up to date. Okay, you got the, it shows all the different accounts or recent calls, all the calls received that were made. I can click on any of these. I can text to do instant messaging to these others. Phone book. These are your, you've got different options on the phone book. You can choose what's in your Outlook. You can create personal contacts. These are the QX phone book directory. So you can upload a directory on a QX that's available for all the users. Different favorites. So I can option any one of those and make those my favorite, and I can create my own favorite list here. Probably my most commonly contacted people. And you have those readily available, so I can call or text to those individuals. You've got your keypad. You want to make a call, you just use the keypad on your keyboard, as well as enter extension or put in your number here. Okay, so if you want to make a call, calling to the auto tenant. And when you're on a call, you can put it on hold, you could bring up a keypad, you can put it on speaker, you can mute the call, you can record the call if you have that option available to you, transfer, start a new call. Okay, at the very top, it shows you which account you're configured to. You do have some settings here for your different states. If you're using those, you can find which states are available. Other people could see your state, have eQall. Here's your messaging, so you can text to other people. All right, so that's the eQall. It has a lot of nice functionality on that. A lot of nice features there. All right, so let's go back to the IP phones. That's pretty much all I wanted to show on that. So let's go, that's how you configure your phones. Let's go back to the extensions. And let's look at a particular extension. I'm going to look at extension 103 here. I'm going to look at the user settings. We've already looked at the admin settings. I'm going to look at the user settings. Okay, so this would be any voicemail settings. Somebody leaves a voicemail. Those would be available. You can delete those messages. Here's your general settings. How long of a message you're going to allow somebody to leave on your voicemail. That's default 5 minutes. The forward and rewind, it's not too many people use this option. I find it to be very useful. When you're listening to a voicemail on your phone and you get to the part of the message where they leave their phone number, often you don't catch the full phone number while you're trying to jot it down. They say it too fast or you don't understand it. So what do you have to do? You have to replay the entire message. So we've got this option in there where all you have to do is press the digit 4 and it's going to rewind by 3 seconds. So you can go back and replay that part of the message. If you hit it 3 times, it'll rewind by 9 seconds. It'll go backwards or forwards. If you press the digit 6, it'll go forward. So if you got a long voicemail and you want to kind of speed it up a little bit, you can press the digit 6 a few times and it'll fast forward. And that allows you to write down a phone number so you can listen to it as many times as you need to catch the phone number. Different options, you probably leave these all at the default. Voicemail notifications. If you're going to get voicemail to email, this is where you'd put in your email address. You can also receive a voicemail with a notification with or without the voicemail attached to it. You can receive a text message, a phone call, different options available. It's going to voicemail indicator on your phone will be lit. You can also press leave a message on your greeting that says if the call is an emergency, please press 0 and you'll be redirected to whatever number or extension that you put in here. Okay, if it's going to an external phone number, you're going to want to use anytime you're going to external, always use the option auto, and this will point the call to the let's say 972-692-1166 FG number. Whoops, I had it auto, right? 972-692-1166. Okay. So just use the auto option. What that's going to do is that's going to send the call to the system call routing table where it's going to find those digits and find the best matching pattern to make the call out of the system, whether it be through the FXO ports or whether it's through the SIP trunk. But it will find those digits in the call routing table itself. So use the auto option. And you can do an out of office a message. So you can record a special greeting that says, hey, I'm out of the office for the next week. For assistance, emergency support, please press 0 or something like that. So you can have a special greeting that's just there for your out of office. You can enable it. I think it's a *86 will turn this option on or off. You can record that voicemail, the greeting through your voicemail options, your settings by dialing *0. And there's an option there to record the out of office message. So it makes it nice because then when you come back to the office, you don't have to. You can also, if needed, on this page, it would allow you to put a time frame on it, so when it expires. But if you recorded it, you can record it from your phone, activate it using the *86 feature code. When you get back to the office, turn it off, and then it'll go back to playing your original greeting message. At the top, there's some basic information, call history, PBX information, speed calling. You can create a speed call list from 00 to 99, and you can add that list by dialing add to it from your phone by using the feature code *76, or you can manage those speed call entries here on this page, and you put in the code that will be dialed. In this case, it's 22, so I would dial #22, and it would place a call to that phone number. All right, some basics. Let's look at the basic services. So this is the no answer. Under general settings, you got the no answer timeout. And by default, it's set for 20 seconds. That's about 3 rings. That's how long the phone's going to ring before the voicemail picks up. If you're doing a no answer call forwarding, that's how long it'll ring before the forwarding takes place. General settings, you have the call waiting option, whether or not that's enabled or not. Your music on hold, you've already got a system-wide setting for that, for the music on hold. Do not disturb settings, when you activate do not disturb by dialing *72, it will, by default, it's only going to be active for 30 minutes. You can change that duration. And then there's some other settings for alarm and dial and announce settings. But let's take a look at the caller ID services. Okay, the caller ID services, it's called caller ID services because you can add different features. You can see on this page there's different features that are active when somebody calls this extension. But you could also add a particular caller ID. So for example, I use the auto option, and when I add a new entry, you can see a whole new list of options that will be provided just for this particular caller ID. So maybe you want a certain type of behavior on certain phone numbers that call in. Maybe it's a spouse's cell phone number or something like that. So you can create different features just for them. Another useful option would be to maybe use the call type, PBX, and maybe just put a star. So with this third setting, basically that applies to any extension in the PBX. Anytime it calls your phone, I can apply maybe a distinctive ring pattern to it, or maybe have special call forwarding. Maybe it goes, whatever it might be. All right, so let's look at. You can click on any one of these options to enable it, or you could just click on this other address. It'll take you to the page where you can go in and change and update all these. All right, we're going to touch on some of these here just quickly. This is for hide caller information, basically to block your caller ID. If you're going to block incoming calls, you can enable that. You can block outbound calls to certain destinations. Distinctive ringing, you can specify, for example, if this is a sales extension, virtual extension, you can specify a prefix to it and maybe a distinctive ringing pattern. All right, next would be call hunting. You can add different extensions in here. So when a call comes in to this extension, if this were enabled, remember every time you go in here, you need to don't forget to enable the feature or service. You'd have to do that by pressing this enable service, and then you save your settings here at the very bottom of the page. So in this case with the call hunting, the call comes in to extension 103, but it's not going to ring 103 right away. Okay, it's actually going to ring extension 100 first for a duration of 15 seconds, and then it's going to ring 102, 15 seconds, and then it's going to ring 103. And since I've enabled the circular mode, it will go back through and start at the top. It'll just continue that pattern until somebody picks up, or such time that the voicemail picks up on this extension. Next is mini extension ringing. I can choose which extensions are going to be called. So when somebody comes in, rings extension 103, this extension will be configured to ring 100, 103, 104, 105, all at the same time. So there's two parts to this. First, you need to update which extensions are included in the group that will be called. So let's say maybe I want to add this eQall extension in there. So you put a check beside it and you click the enable disable. All right, so right now I've got these 5 extensions, but the feature itself is not turned on. So I need to enable the feature and press save. And that's going to enable the feature, okay? All right, I will turn that off here for now. Okay, the next is various flavors of call forwarding. There's unconditional call forwarding, where all calls are forwarded on every call attempt. You've got a busy call forwarding. So when your extension's busy, it'll forward no answer forwarding. So after 3 or 4 rings, you can call forward the extension. And then when the phone's unregistered, you can create a yet another call forwarding option. It's very simple. You can activate this actually from your phone by dialing *4. You can enable, and basically when you dial *4 from your phone, it would prompt you to enable or disable the feature, the call forwarding. And it will also prompt you if you want to change the actual number that your extension's forwarding to. Find Me, Follow Me, real useful option. A lot of people really like to use the Find Me, Follow Me. So to get familiar with it, there's a couple settings here. One is, first of all, you're going to define what numbers are going to be called when this extension 103 gets a call. You're going to choose whether or not you're going to ring the extension itself, the 103 that has the phone. You can ring it immediately, or you can put it hold off, ring it after a few seconds has passed. You can also define which other destinations are going to be called. So let's say this is called extension 100. You're going to start ringing that extension after 10 seconds has passed, and you're going to continue to ring it indefinitely until such time that somebody picks up, or when the voicemail answers for this extension 103 after you define again how many seconds, whether it's 20, 30, 40 seconds. I do recommend if you're doing Find Me, Follow Me that you have your no answer timeout set to at least 40 seconds, especially if you're going out to a cell phone. So for example, if this second entry was out to a cell phone, you're going to start ringing it immediately and it'll continue to ring. And you're also going to prompt that caller for a confirmation passcode. Okay, the purpose of that passcode is not so much for security, but it is to make sure that the caller is ready to accept that phone call. Okay, and the passcode that they're going to enter is this whatever you define here. In this case, something simple, 111. So the caller receives the call to their or the cell phone receives the call to their to the phone. They answer it. They press the digits. They'll be prompted to enter the confirmation code. They put in the digits 111. At that point, they'll be talking with the caller, and the other phones will stop ringing right away. And the reason we prompt for that passcode is mainly so that if the cell phone rejects the call, or if it's powered off or whatever out of range, that way the call does not end up, the originator does not end up in the cell phone's voicemail box, the user's personal voicemail on the cell phone. If they don't enter the PIN code properly, then they're not going to receive the call. All right, so with the PIN code, we can prevent that from happening. There's the couple greetings that are played when you first, the caller first, they're going to hear this little welcome message. You can record it, or you can just play ring back. You can put a delay on hearing that recording. And then while they're waiting for the call to be answered, after they hear the first message, they're going to be sitting there. You can just play silence, no audio. You could do our default music on hold. You could play ringback tone, custom recording, or use the audio line in jack if you want to play the music on hold. All right, so there's that's the Find Me, Follow Me option. There's some other options like dial and announce. This is for maybe like a panic situation. You want to send out a broadcast notification across to everybody in the building that there's an emergency, they need to evacuate, maybe for a fire, or maybe unfortunately with these days, if there's an active shooter at the school or something like that, you want to activate some sort of announcement for everybody to take shelter in place, take cover. School's on lockdown or something, you can do an announcement that way. Okay, the way that works is you just create a list, add the extensions, whether it's going to be the local extension. If it's a local extension, you're going to define whether or not that phone's going to go off hook automatically with an auto answer. If they're on an active call, you can interrupt that call. And with the message, if it's that important, then you want to drop their existing phone call so that they can receive and hear that announcement coming in. You can also make a call out to an external party. Again, use the auto option and put in the phone number. And you can use the audio line out, so you can page to the overhead paging system. You can specify how long you're going to be ringing the extension, and maybe you want to put a little delay on it for the user, give them a chance to answer the call. Okay, then once you add that, then you're going to want it to, you can even put the name on here, maybe whatever announcement you want to hear. how many times you're going to play the announcement. Maybe you want to play it twice, maybe put a slight delay, couple second delay in between each play attempt. And then the actual announcement itself, you can record it from your extension or upload it. And that would be what they're going to hear once they hear that message, all right, once it gets played to them. Okay, so that's pretty much it. All I want to show for the caller extensions, caller ID services. Let's go back to the main page. Let's look at the auto tenant settings. We're not going to have a chance to go through these other settings at the top here, like dialing directories, where you can create a phone book directory, where you can upload it. You can manage it here from within the system. You can create a conferences. Recordings is important. This is where you're going to do your recordings. For example, like your music on hold. You can do an edit on that. You can upload a file. You can listen to the RTP channel or the audio line in jack. All right, let's go back. We're going to look at the extensions here a minute and look at the auto tenant. Okay, I chose 00 because it's set up for a default auto tenant. So if I go to the general settings, the attendant settings, you define the scenario that the how the auto tenant is going to be used, whether it's just a basic default auto tenant, which isn't going to have a lot of options. You're either going to use the standard auto tenant or a custom auto tenant. You won't have to worry about VXML. Thank goodness. So if I look at the auto tenant, the standard auto tenant comes with just a couple options. First, you've got when you hear the when they connect, the caller connects to the auto tenant, they're going to hear an initial welcome message, like welcome to the auto tenant or thank you for calling Epigee Technologies. So the general introductory message, and then you're going to play the real message that you want them to hear, and that's going to be, if you know your party's extension, please dial it now. If you if you want your call to be redirected, if you don't know your party's extension, you can do pound with a dial by name. You can press 0 and be redirected. That's what this option is for. If they press 0, you can redirect that call to some extension in the office. So you can just play it's called a recurring message because after it's played once, you can repeat it a time or two. And most people just record just one message and they're just going to do the recurring message. They don't worry about the welcome message. So that's probably a good suggestion. It'll play the entire message from beginning to end and even the introduction. So you just do a recurring message. You can define how many times it's going to play. That's the repetition. And after they hear that message, say 2 times, and they still haven't made an option, they haven't pressed any digits, at that point you can redirect that call to some extension in the office. All right, it's very limited. That's all you can do. You can press 0, or you can call it to some extension. So the standard auto tenant, it'll work for a lot of people. That's all they need. But if you need more options, press 1, press 2, press 3, and all this, then for that you're going to need to go to a custom auto tenant. And for that, let's go to extension 11, auto tenant 11. If I go to the tenant settings, you can see that I've defined it as a custom auto tenant. If I click on the tenant scenario, you can edit the scenario And again, you get the option of having a welcome message or just play the recurring prompts. I would probably just do the recurring prompts. You can click on this record from extension and it would ring your local extension and allows you to record the greeting. So for example, let's see if I were to record this welcome message, record from extension, you specify which extension you're going to be sitting at, start recording, my phone rings, answer, and then it'll prompt you to do the actual recording. Okay, I'm not going to do the recording, but you can see that's the record from extension option, or if you already had the file, you can upload it. Play count, that's how many times you're going to play the greeting, and interval if there's a delay between playing it for the first and second intervals. And then down below, there's one option here that's real important. It says, so here you've got all your options, all the keypad from 0 to 9, star, and pound. I've actually added all of these. And you can, so you can have a greeting. It says, if you know your party's extension, please dial it, enter it now. So if they're to enter extension 100, we don't want them to go to option 1. We want them to call to that extension. So that's what this bottom option is for. You actually need to enable it. It says if they dial, if they choose something other than what's entered above, then just try to call to that number that's dialed. So if they dial 100, try to call the number. Okay, if they don't select any input, they're just sitting there at the auto attendant, then you can maybe send that call to some extension in the office. We also have a call park option on there now, so you can park it. Okay. This is the main menu. So let's look at some of these the options. You could press 0, for assistance, please press 0. Let's do an edit so you can see how that looks. Press 0 and you're going to call to a particular extension. You've got the options of no action. You can go to a sub menu. So if you enable that one, you can go to marketing, sales, support. You can create another option, a fourth menu or fifth option, whatever it might be. And that's going to take you to a sub menu where you're going to have more options to press. I'll show you that here in a moment. You can call to a particular number. Maybe that's an external number. There is a way of doing that where it'll index the call routing table, and you need a special entry in the call routing table to allow that call. For security purposes, by default, it won't go out, so you need to create a special entry for that. There's a extension directory for the dial by name, and there's an option to park the call or terminate the call. So if we give it a sub menu, like for example, press 2 for support, press 3 for marketing, it'll take you to the sub menu called support. I can click on it right here and go to that sub menu, or at the top I can go to sub menus and do an edit on any of these menus I've created, and you've got all the keypad options available to you. Again, you can record another greeting, whatever it might be. You can say for Epig sales, please press 0 to speak with Andy. For some other sales, press 1. So you can record whatever greetings, whatever options you want on that. All right, back to the main menu. But that's it for the auto attendant. There's a dial timeout here at the bottom that you want to, by default, it's set for 4 seconds, and that's a little bit long. You probably want to set it to 2 or 3 seconds. That's how long it'll wait before it decides that you've made a selection. Okay, let's just see where we are here. Okay, let's look at some incoming calls. We're going to go to interfaces. The easiest call that you can have is that of an incoming call on one of the FXO ports. All right, excuse me. So at that point, you go to interfaces, FXO, and this is a QX200. It has 4 FXO ports on it. And I can click on any one of these FXOs, FXO1, and I can specify I want incoming calls to go to a particular extension. I can also send those incoming calls to the call routing table, where I could take some special actions, like based on the time of day, I want to go to one extension versus an external after hours number or something. Down here, there's a field for your PSTN, the actual number. It's just a text box only. You just put in whatever you want on that field. It's just to identify that number that's connected to that the external line that's connected to that port. So that's the easiest call that you can have, just an incoming call on one of your FXO ports. So let's take a look at SIP trunks. SIP trunks are not that much more difficult, but we do need to explain this. Okay, for the SIP trunks, we have created a voice over IP carrier wizard. Okay, when you sign up for service with an ITSP, Internet Telephony Service Provider, for your SIP trunks, you're going to get an account with them, and on that account, you're going to get some DIDs. That's just your 10-digit phone numbers. You might have 1, you might have 5, you might have 10 or 20. All right. When you get a call for one of those DIDs, they need to know where to send that call to. Of all the places on the internet, they need to know where you're located. So for that, they need to know what your public IP address is for your site. There's 2 ways that they're going to find that out and identify that. Okay, the first would be they're just going to ask you, they're going to say, all right, what's your public IP? And they're just going to put that to your account, and when you get a call for one of those DIDs, you're going to receive that call, and you have to be prepared. You have to configure the system to receive a call to each of those DIDs, and that implies that you must have a static public IP address. That's not going to change. Okay, it'll remain the same. Okay, so that's one method. The second method is that using they identify your public IP by you registering with them. Okay, the IP phones that are connected to the system, the local phones, they're doing the same thing. That they're performing a registration with that username and password, and they're going to do that once every hour. Well, the SIP trunk is it's the same thing. You're going to create an account, basically an extension on a system that's going to have that username and password on it for the provider, the SIP trunk provider, and every hour you're going to go out and connect and provide and register with them. And when you register, they're going to see where that registration came from, and they're going to update. And if your IP address should change for some reason, they'll update the account with the new IP address. All right, so they'll know where to send the calls to. So let's look at how we provision the second option using the SIP trunk. Okay, for that we're going to go to the Voice over IP Carrier Wizard. Okay, so we've got there's a drop-down box. There's a manual. You can manually provision the the SIP trunk, or you're going to see a drop-down list of some ITSPs that we've done some testing with, and for whatever reason, maybe for marketing purposes, we've decided to add their SIP trunk here to the account. Not a lot of benefit other than what we're going to do is we're going to pre-provision some of the fields like the server information. Okay, but you could just as easily do that when you do the manual method. Okay, when you go to authenticate, they're going to ask you for the account name, whatever they give you. It might be a number or maybe a specific name. We're just going to call it test ITSP. They're going to give you a password. You need to enter that password here. Their server IP address, whatever their server name is, and their server port number, which is most likely going to be 5060. On the right side, you probably want to enable the R2P proxy option. If they gave you a different authentication username than what's on your account, then they'll tell you that, and you can provision that here. If there's a different proxy server, they're going to also tell you that. Okay, so you go to the next. And this is the voice over IP carrier access code. This is how you're going to dial, what digits are you going to dial to when you're going to use that SIP trunk. By prefix, that means a prefix digit, like you dial 9 and the 10-digit phone number. Okay, by pattern, you just pick up the phone and dial a 10-digit number, and each digit is represented by a question mark. I think for our case, we're going to use the prefix. You can also specify if there's you're going to use this for 911, and if the main account was also a DID, you can send incoming calls to a particular extension. Failover to PSTN, this means if you try to go out on the SIP trunk, if it doesn't work, you can try one of your FXO ports. Enter your settings, finish that. Okay, so a couple things are that are going on here. One is the it does a couple things for you on a VoIP Carrier Wizard. Let's go to the extensions page. And you can see it creates this extension, a virtual extension, extension 998. It even tells you it was added by the Voice over IP Carrier Wizard. And there's the account information, test_ITSP. Let's do an edit on that extension. Okay, if we look at the so in here in the name it has the voice, it tells you it was added by the Voice over IP Carrier Wizard. If I look at the SIP settings, then it has the username that I gave it, test_ITSP, has the password. Okay, and then it has the server IP address, has the port number, and they do require registration. So right now on my system, I'm trying to go out and contact the server at this IP address with this account information. And of course, it's fictitious. It doesn't exist. So it's going to fail. I'm actually going to turn that registration off. Okay, but if it was successful, then they would identify my IP address, and then they'd be ready to send me calls. Okay, so that's where you need to configure the DIDs. So they're going to give you an account, it registers. At that point, you need to configure all of your DIDs in the system itself. Okay, how do we configure the DIDs? Again, that's just your 10-digit phone numbers. You can, the way that the system handles an incoming SIP call, it's going to do one of two things. It's going to, first thing it's going to do is it's going to check the SIP address field. And it's going to try to find the DID number. So if I receive a call to 972-692-1166, it's going to go through and run down this whole list and try to find that matching pattern. If it finds it, it's going to ring that extension. Okay, it's that simple. So I could assign that DID. Let's say if I have a DID, I can go to the SIP settings of this extension, and you can see the same place where we put the account information, because sometimes it's one and the same. Sometimes the DID number is the account information. And in here, you just put in the phone number, 972-692-1166. You need to put it in exactly as they're sending it to you. Okay, if they're just sending you a 10-digit number, you put in the 10-digit number. If they send it to you with a 1 in front of it, you need the 1. There's also a format called EIN, where it puts a plus sign in front of it. So if they're using the EIN format, it might come at you with a 1, plus 1. Okay, but whatever it is, that's the pattern it has to match. So if they send me the call, it checks the table, finds the match, and it rings to extension 103. Okay, it's that simple. That could be a virtual extension where maybe it's going to ring several phones in the office. Maybe each person has their own DID number. Okay, so that's an option. You can give each extension its own DID. Maybe you've got some users have DIDs, some have most of the users do not. Okay, so you can assign the ones that do. But once it gets if it doesn't find the DID, let's say you have 10 DIDs and it's only going to ring to this one, but the other 10 aren't listed here. Okay, if it gets to the bottom of the table, it still hasn't found any match. At that point, it will check the call routing table for the same matching pattern. All right, so you can put the DID here or in the call routing table. Either one will work just fine. The advantage with the call routing table is you can apply some date and time functions. Maybe during the day, it's going to go to ring all the phones. After hours, you want a second entry where it's going to go to the audit attendant for the night service greeting. It is in the call routing table. It's the only place where you apply any sort of time and date functionality for incoming calls. All right, so with that, let's take a look at the call routing table. All right, excuse me, let me get a quick drink. All right, we're going to go through this pretty quick. So you get some entries in here. I've already have my service provision, so I've already got some entries in here that we can look at. So the way this table is laid out, you can see it has, let's say we've got 16 different entries. I could put a check beside any one of these entries. I can enable the entry. I could disable the entry. I can add a new entry. I can edit the existing entry. I can duplicate an entry. That helps because it saves from having to add all the external information again, like for example, like all that. I could just duplicate an entry, and that way I only have to change one or two items. You can delete an entry. For some entries, the order in which these entries are listed is important. For that reason, we give you an option to click on it, and you can move it up or move it down or move it even to a particular uh, slot or entry into the table. Okay, so you see the entry number 1. It gives the destination number pattern. This call routing table is used for a couple things. One, it could be used, as we mentioned, for incoming calls. You could put the DIDs in here, and you could list the DIDs. The call routing table is also checked for when the user picks up the phone, they dial some digits, and it will check the call routing table to figure out what to do with those digits. If the user picks up the phone and they dial a set of digits and they dial and they go to make a call, then they might hear a message that says number dialed doesn't exist. Okay, if they hear that message, that means there's no matching pattern for the digits that were dialed. Okay, let's see if I can actually just got busy on that one, but if you were to enter some digits and there's no matching pattern, you might hear the message says number dialed doesn't exist. Okay, so then you need to check your call routing table. Okay, so here's the pattern. This is the digits dialed. For example, this is 933. Very specific. The user picked up the phone, dialed a 3-digit number, 933, and for that, that's actually a test number that I can use to test for 911. And then just below that, I do have an entry for 911. Dial 911, it's going to make an IP to PSTN. That's a SIP call. And it's going to go out on the flow route. That's my ITSP. If there's an entry for 8, and then you can see after there's a wild card, there's a star or asterisk, which means we don't care how many digits you dial after the 8. You can dial 3 digits, 10 digits, 20 digits. We don't care. But we are going to take action. We're going to delete the first digit. NDS actually stands for a quantity, how many. It's the number of discarded symbols. It's called symbols because we're dealing with SIP. SIP is alphanumeric. It doesn't necessarily have to be digits. So if it's easier for you to remember, just think of a number of digits you're going to delete. In this case, we're deleting the 8, which was an access code. Any remaining digits, we're going to make a SIP call. And it's going to go out to sip.epigee.com where we can reach other users on the Epigee SIP server. Entry number 4, very simply, the user picks up the phone, they dial a 2-digit number, and for that call, you're going to make you're going to call to some extension in the PBX. The same for a 3-digit extension. Okay, so I told you can have a mix and match of 2, 3, 4-digit extensions, but you do need an entry in your call routing table to allow you to dial those extensions. 00 allows you to reach the auto tenant. 55 I'm using as a prefix code, and I delete the 55, and the remaining 3 digits I'm making a direct call to somebody's voicemail box. So if I dial 55103, I've reached directly to a voicemail. Instead of hearing it ring 3 times and then voicemail picks up, I can do a direct call to voicemail. You can also transfer to the 55103. 56 I've used for intercom. So if I dial 56103, that's a direct intercom, and that's actually, let's go this way. 56103. Okay, at that point, it's actually using it'd be intercom, and I can make a direct call to somebody's basically it's an auto answer. Okay, it's an intercom where the number that you called, the extension that you dialed, will auto answer to that. It'll go off hook. The microphone is open and the speaker is open as well. Okay. And here I've got a DID number, and you can see that they are sending it to me with a +1. And I received that number, and I have to delete all 12 digits, including and characters, including the +1. So I received the number, the DID number. I delete 12 digits, and I'm going to make a call to an extension in the PBX. Which extension? I'm going to call to extension 601. Okay, I've got an entry for just below that. I can make an outbound call, dialing 1 plus 10 digits, and that's going to also go out on my SIP trunk. And I've got a second entry for callers that only are going to dial 10 digits. So I allow the caller to dial with 10 digits or 1 plus 10 digits, either way. In this case, they dial with 10 digits. I'm going to prefix the 1 for them and make a call out on the SIP trunk. There's an entry here for international calls, 011 star, and it is disabled by default for security reasons. Don't need it enabled if you don't need it, if you're not making international calls. If you're not making international calls, you actually don't need a 011 entry at all. Okay, when we did the voice over IP carrier wizard, you saw that it created that extension 998, where it created the account, and that account is registering to the trying to register to that service. But I also specified that I'm going to use dial 9 to use that SIP trunk, and so it created these entries for me. One is the dial 9 with a star pattern. It deletes the 9 and it will make a call to that SIP trunk. And if for any reason there's a failover reason right here, if you look at the top, it says failover reason. If for any reason that call fails, maybe the internet connection is not working, maybe the SIP trunk's not working, if for any reason that call attempt fails, I'm going to place a call out on one of the FXO ports, where it'll go out across the private line, POTS line. Okay, same thing for 911. 911, it's going to try to go out on the SIP trunk first, and then if that doesn't work, then fail over and go out on the FXO. Typically, if you have a POTS line, you probably want your 911 calls to go out on a POTS line because they know the building location where that call is coming from. All right, so let's take a look at some of these entries here a little bit more detail here. So for the SIP trunk, for the outbound entry, you can see that on this call, you dial 1 plus 10 digits, very specific. There's no wild card at the end or whatever, so it's a very specific 1 plus 10 digits, and it's going to go out on the SIP trunk. We've given you a shortcut here where it says actions. If you click on this little the gear wheel, it allows, instead of putting a check beside the entry and then scrolling up every time, because some users, some systems have a very large call routing table with maybe 100, 200 entries. So it's a little tiresome to put a check and then scroll all the way up to the top and then do an edit. So what we've done is we've given you some shortcuts. So you just click on it right here in place. No scrolling needed, just modify the entry. So we've done a lot of those types of shortcuts throughout the system over the last couple of years, and it's really made navigation within the system, made it really simple and quick. All right. So here's the destination number pattern dial 1 plus 10 digits. Your call type, You've got you can make a call to extensions of the PBX, direct to voicemail, intercom call, SIP call. SIP call and IP to PSTN are pretty much the same. Or you make an outbound call on one of your FXOs. SIP versus IP to PSTN, the SIP option just gives you a couple more settings that you're allowed to play with. The metric, you don't really need to worry about that. You could put a description on this. It is important that you enable this. By default, it will be this filter on source. We'll show you that here in a moment. When I make an outbound call on the SIP trunk, that's the destination server or host address. That could be an IP, or it could be the host name and the port that they're using. When I do make that outbound call to them, they're going to, more often than not, they're going to challenge that call. They're not going to just allow it to proceed just because they recognize the IP address. They're going to challenge the call. They're going to ask for your credentials, your account information, the username and password that they gave you. So we've already configured that account. I mean, you could put it here in this username and password field, whatever it might be. But we've already configured it once, and we've used that account to go off and register to the SIP trunk. So therefore, if they request the account information, we can do so with this use extension settings. Okay, and it's going to, if they request authentication, we have the account information. It's on extension 999, so just go ahead and provide them that username and password. And then the call will proceed from there. Here's some other options. You can restrict the outbound calls. RTP proxy, you probably want to enable that one. Next page. This page is probably the most important page in the entire system, believe it or not. All right, so this page is identifying the source of the call, and it also allows you to change the caller ID. So on this source, we're basically looking at the originator of the call. Who was it that picked up the phone and dialed the digits? 1 plus 10 digits. Who we want to know more about this caller. Okay, we want to know if we should allow this caller to proceed or not. So we're going to specify that the source, if you're going to use this call routing entry, the source type, or where the call originated from, it must be an extension on the PBX, a valid extension on this PBX. Which extension? We actually put a wildcard here. We don't care which extension. You could create a short list, and you could actually say maybe extensions in the maybe 100 to 103 or something like that. If you look at the help page, it'll give you some options around that. You could specify all extensions in the 100 range, but we're just going to specify a wildcard. We don't care which extension it is as long as it's a valid extension on the PBX. In outbound, we're going to modify the caller ID. We're going to delete all the digits that currently exist, which is the extension number and whatever other digits. You don't have to be exact. You could put, we're going to delete 20 digits, 50 digits, 99 digits. It doesn't matter. Delete the digits, and we're going to replace the caller ID with whatever we want to see, which is the external, our main number, our 972-692-1166. And you could also put a name here, a display name, in this case Epigee. And then lastly, you finish your settings, okay? And so that was the entry number 10. If we look at the settings, you can see the options as they look on the table compared to some of the others. This is the digits we deleted, that we modified the caller ID, and this was the again, the very most important option in the system. We're going to allow any extension in the PBX to dial the digits 1 plus 10 digits and make the outbound call. That is your security, and that's how you restrict the use of this entry from other outsiders or anybody else allowing to use that entry. You notice on the inbound call, where this call did come to us from an external source outside the system, our source type right now is set to any. So that's a call that came to us through the SIP trunk, and we set that to any because we want it to allow the external call into the system and make a call to our DID number where we're going to ring some local extensions. All right, okay, so we looked at the options, the source type. All right, we can put some scheduling on that DID maybe during the I'll show you real quickly how you can do that. So you've got an incoming DID. By default, it's going to go to this extension 601. But maybe I want to have that entry go to another extension during the day. Maybe after hours. Maybe after hours, I want it to go to a maybe during the day we're going to go to extension 601. After hours, we want it to go to another number. So let's see how we do that. So we do an edit on this entry, and you'll see an option on the very first page. If you enable any one of these, it'll bring up some additional settings. So I can option the date time settings for this so that I can specify a time frame. I can use this time frame here where I could say maybe just during the weekdays, Monday through Friday, and then put a time frame here. I can do that. Here's your time frame, or I could use the scheduling option, and I could specify which schedule I'm going to be using. All right, maybe company schedule. Okay, the schedule is defined up here in the very top right-hand side. It says schedules, and you can see the company schedule. This is going to be active Monday through Friday from 9 to 1, and then from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. at night. Monday through Friday, that schedule will be active. Okay, I've also created a schedule ID. A schedule ID can be used to reference this company's schedule, where I can turn that schedule on and off by using the key on one of the phones. So how do we apply that schedule? So excuse me. So the entry number 9 has the first entry on it. Let's put a check beside, or let's duplicate this option. And maybe after hours, when the schedule is not active, I want it to go to 00. Very simply, go to the auto attendant. And actually for this one, I'm going to turn the schedule off. This is the second entry. Don't need to apply the schedule on the second entry. Okay, I told you previously the order which these entries are listed is important, so I'm going to move this entry up after entry number 9, or before entry number 10. Oops, 10. Okay, so I've got 2 entries. The incoming call, it finds this pattern. It's going to ring extension 601, but it's only going to do that if this company's schedule, if that time frame is active. So if it's any of the times that are referenced in that company schedule, this call routing entry will be active, and it's going to call to extension 601. If it's outside that time frame, you might as well it's the same as this entry being disabled. It'll find the next matching pattern, which would be entry number 10, and it's going to go to extension 00. So very simple. That's how you create do some scheduling. And if you need to create add that schedule to a key on the phone, you just go to your interfaces, click on your MPK settings of one of your phones, click on the key, and there's your schedule that can be active. Excuse me. So then you can have that schedule. You can reference it, maybe office hours. You can manually override and toggle that schedule. You can see when it's active. That schedule will be, the light will be lit. After the time has passed, when it's not active, the light will go off. And then you can manually override it. You can set it permanently on or permanently off, so you can activate the schedule early. Let's say if you go home early one day, you can activate the schedule for the after hours to kick in early. Okay, let's just take a look at the how we're doing on our time. All right, we don't have a lot of time left here. Let's look at the, so that's the basics of the call routing table. Let's just look at status, system status, general information. The system's been up for the last 28 days. Network information shows the LAN IP, the WAN IP, and the VLAN IP. Lines shows me all the different lines in the system, FXO, FXS, FXOs, and IP lines, and which phones are configured to those. Memory will show me the how much memory is allocated per extension, how much is used, how much has been, how much is still available. If I go to hardware, it shows the LAN WAN ports that are active. And then I've got an SD memory card in the system. So that's important. We'll talk about that here in a moment, but you do want that SD memory card. It'll give you extra memory for your voicemail recordings. It also makes it easier to perform a software update. If you look at next tab is SIP registration. This is to go out and register to the external servers, and the account is successfully registered. And then the IP phones. The IP phones are going to register uniquely to each phone will register to the system. And it shows not only the IP address that the phone is registered from, when it registered, and that registration expires within an hour. So it shows the how much time is left before the phone registration expires, at which time the phone needs to re-register again. Okay, if we look at license, there's some licenses that are allocated to individual extensions. And then you can see where, for example, like eQall has been given, I've got 11 available to me, and I've given enabled one eQall. Okay, let's look at the maintenance. Actually, let's look at status. I want to show status, and then you've got your call history, which is your CDR records. You can see those. Let's look at events. Your system event logs. It's going to show you different activity going on in the system. I have mentioned that so green is good, yellow's maybe not so good, and red is it's not good. Okay, so if there's some red, you may want to take a look at it. And as I told you before, my system, um, I don't have it secured in the way I want to show everybody else, okay? Because I like to see the activity coming in. But on your system, you should have it secured, locked down. That way, calls can't come in from external resources. But I like to show this. You can see that there are external. You see what's in red here. These are external um, attempts from outside sources that they've tried to make a register to my system. Okay, in this case, uh, they tried to dial extension 225, 226, 27, 28, 29, 30. Okay, and once they get to after about the 10th attempt from that IP address, does the system do? It blocks it. Okay, so it sees that IP and it sees that it's just continuously trying to make calls to random extensions that don't even exist. And after the 10th fail attempt, we block that IP address. Okay, and then so we go ahead and so this one was trying to register, and it wasn't trying to call extension 230, 231. It was actually trying to register to those extensions. All right, so after a few attempts, we block it. And the same thing is if it tries to call to a number and that number is invalid, it does so for several times, we're going to block that IP address. So that's a good thing. So let's take a look at the firewall settings just real quickly. Let's see what that's all about. So if we go to the firewall, you can see it's enabled. It's set to medium, and that's good. You look at the filtering rules, and in here you can specify under SIP access. You can specify, and I do recommend this, and we're going to talk about this in an upcoming series or webinar, that you can specify that you're going to allow SIP traffic to be received to this device from a particular, let's say, group. And so you can do that. And that group, in this case, is called SIP access. So if I go to the IP groups called SIP access, I'm specifying that I'm only allowing SIP traffic from these locations. Okay, by doing so, if I have that enabled, then it's not going to allow that external traffic from external IP addresses, wherever it might be coming from, anywhere in the world. You can basically eliminate those. The blocked IPs, so when those IPs, they get blocked, they get added to this list. You can see that the list has grown. This is basically since the beginning of the year. The system has blocked all these outside IP addresses. Okay, and so it's busy at work. So you do want to make sure you enable allow access from your restricted IPs, maybe your SIP trunks. And in the SIP IDS, this is the mechanism that's actually busy at work that's blocking those IPs. You can go here to your SIP exceptions. You could put in your local subnet for your phones. Let's say if it's on a 172 or a 198 or a 192, 168. You can also put in the IP address for your SIP trunk provider, all your friendly IP addresses. You can list all those in here in the SIP in the exceptions list. If they're in this list, we're not going to block those IPs. Okay, if the IP's not or subnet's not listed in that SIP IDS, then it's possible that we might end up blocking it. Maybe there's a number that's repeatedly called, and it's possible to get it blocked. So you want to add your friendly IPs to this exceptions list. All right, we'll talk about that more again coming up. Maintenance, diagnostics. You can you can run FXO if you have FXO ports. I do recommend that you run these FXO diagnostics. At the end of the diagnostics, it's going to do a series of tests, and at the end, it's going to give you a value that you're going to go to one of our hidden menu pages. You're going to enter that value in the FXO settings. That way, it optimizes your FXO ports. It might eliminate problems with some echo or DTMF digits or things like that. Security diagnostics. So here you can do a security audit on a system. You run the security audit, and it checks all your call routing tables and entries and your IP phones. Make sure they all have good, strong passwords. And then if you look at the report, it tells you everything looks pretty good. There's no red, no security items found in the call routing table. A couple extensions we're going to want to, maybe the password's a little weak. It mentions those. So the administrator password, it's a little bit weaker than they'd like to see. So it gives you a warning on all that. Now if you had a call routing entry where your source type, an outbound call and a source type was set to any, it would give you a red warning on that, because that could be potential for somebody to make an external phone call. Obviously, you don't want that. All right, so there's the diagnostics. There's the next is network capture. You can do a packet capture on the LAN or WAN port. Excuse me. System logs, real useful for us, and hopefully for yourself as well. Before you make a phone call, you could go in here, put a log marker, click on it. That's going to give you a reference point, so that when you go to make your phone call, it'll help you identify that call in the logs. So now if I click on the SIP user agent, there's a scroll bar on the right hand side, and this goes all the way down. It shows there's a couple, probably 800 lines of information, but you'll see the log marker that I entered. The next call that I make will be below that log marker, so that helps me identify it, and I can search on that comment that I made. Let's see, I was going to show some logs maybe from yesterday. Let me just see if I can find it real quick without spending a lot of time. That's actually today. That's fine. I was going to try to find a call for you just to identify what an external call attempt would look like for like an invalid call. All right, here's one actually. This came from external IP sent to my system, and for some reason they're just trying to dial to extension 100. It came from a tool that they're running called SipVicious, and it tried to ring a local extension. Okay, so that's one of the IPs that got blocked. Okay, the system identified that after a few failed call attempts. We blocked that IP address, and that way they weren't able to continue to try to make call attempts towards the system, because it does use, although we're trying to respond to that local user extension on a system trying to make a phone call, we're also trying to respond to this external caller. So it does definitely put a little bit of tax the system there a little bit. Not too much, but if the calls are too many, then the system can get busy trying to process those calls and maybe not have time to process a local call. That's why that's why we've built in some of these mechanisms, so we don't allow that call to continue to make attempts and have the system having to deal with it. It'll block that IP, and then we won't have to deal with it anymore. All right, so definitely some good options on the security front with the system. Again, a better option would be to have the firewall just only listening to certain your SIP trunks, their IPs, their friendly IPs, so you can configure them that way. The user rights, this is where you can enable, of course, admin is enabled, and then you get local administrator, you can enable that one. And then you could define what level of access. You can click on roles and define what level of access that they have allowed menus they're allowed access to. All right, let's go to the backup and restore. So it's very easy to save your configuration. There's no reason for somebody not to have a current configuration of the system. You just click download, and you see down at the bottom, it creates a file, saves it for you, and it's already created it. All right, it's already done. I already saved my configuration. It's very easy to do. There's the option to, if you're doing a call center, then you may want to save the EAC data separately. Actually, I recommend that you do that, or the configuration with the EAC data. If you need to restore a configuration file from previous, you can do that with the upload. If for some reason you're doing a factory reset on the system, maybe from the beginning, you could do the reset here. You can provision the system to do an automatic backup so that it will send the configuration file to your email, and you can put that on a schedule. So every Sunday night at midnight, I receive an email, and attached to that email is my system configuration file. Again, no excuse for not having a current working configuration for your for the system. All right, firmware update. You can go get the software off our the firmware off our website, off the support portal. Download it to your PC, keep it on your desktop, and then come in here and do a firmware update. Prior to doing the firmware update, you do want to save your config. Okay, that's just that just makes common sense. Save your config prior to doing a software update. The software update's either going to be a 2-step or 3-step process. Let me just quickly mention that. Okay, the system out of the box by default, it'll be a 3-step process. So you'll save your config, you'll perform the software update, and then after the software update, you're going to restore the configuration file. Okay, as part of the software update process, some of the settings, the recordings and things like that, they get greeting messages that they get lost as part of the firmware update. So you do want to restore the config. Okay, the configuration file actually has all your system settings, of course, and it also has all your greeting messages, all your greetings for your auto tenant, all your greetings for your extensions. Okay, so when you restore that config file, it's going to put back all the greetings. However, it does not save, the config file does not save voicemails. We don't store voicemails. Probably not a problem. Most people are getting their voicemails to their email anyway, so that they have a local copy of it. But the config file does not save voicemails. Otherwise, that file would be it'd be extraordinarily large. All right. Um, However, if you have an SD memory card, as I do in my system, that makes the whole process go a little bit easier. In fact, a whole lot easier. You can come in here, do your save your config. That just makes good sense. Save your config. Step one. Perform the software update at that point. After the update's complete, you're done. You still have all your greetings. You still have all your voicemails. Everything's there. They're all saved on that SD card, and then you're complete. And that makes it real simple. The That also enables you to do the automatic firmware update. Okay, so that way you can configure the system so that by default, it's going to go out and check and notify you anytime we post new software. So it goes out, checks our server, checks to see if there's been new firmware posted, and if so, it will notify you in the system event logs. If one day you decide, okay, there's new firmware available, I want to go ahead and update the system, all you got to do is change this to check and update, press save your settings. So now tonight at midnight, it would go out, check for new firmware, and if it's available, it will go ahead and download it and update the system. If I click the check now option, it would check and notify or update it right now, during the middle of the day. All right, so that's it for the session for today. The last option is the reboot option, so you can reboot the system if needed. You can do the reboot device, and that's your reboot option. Okay, but that concludes the session for today. I know it was a long call. Thank you for staying with me. For all those that attended the entire call, I appreciate that. We will try to make this available on the recording. So once that's available, we'll get that posted for you. All right, thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording now.